Hey, what's up, bitches? How we doing? Nobody. Hi, Port Bear. Good to see you. I was just bored and wanted to talk and see if anybody wanted to chat. And a couple specific things that, or maybe just one that I'm thinking about that I want to tease through and work through my thoughts on. Nice. That's beautiful. How many babies do you have? Babies? I'm guessing they're not like, baby babies. Maybe one is. Hello, Scar Bear. Welcome. Two girls. That's adorable. Precious. You're blessed, Port Bear. Um, yeah, I mean, I made a post on the singles group on Bertaria. One is 26 months, one is 2 months. Wow. So yeah, they're babies. One is a legitimate baby, one is toddler baby. I'm sure you have your hands full with them. But what could be better than that? Really, what could be better than that? That's just great. Yeah, I made a post for the singles chat on Bertaria Times. I figured it was time. Well, I've been thinking about it for a bit, like not just today, but past weeks and whatnot. And it's more so a concept of how intimacy works and the different, I guess you could say, stages of intimacy. And I just wanted to talk about it because I've like written a page or two down in my notebook about it, and I've gotten some of my base ideas down, but I know there's more there that I was hoping, if I just talk about it, maybe it'll flow and I'll see if I get somewhere. So I'll start with what I got so far. I've got 5 stages of intimacy. I might, I might, I kind of think it might be better to think of them as like spheres, but that's arbitrary. Doesn't matter. The first stage of intimacy is intellectual, which is sharing thoughts and opinions and talking about your ideas and your theories of how the world works and everything that goes into that. Everything that's going on up here. And then second stage of intimacy is personal. Personal intimacy, which is kind of like, what's your history? What have you gone through and experienced that has made you the person you are? Like, actual experiences. So personal intimacy would be talking to somebody else about what you've gone through and how it has shaped you as a person. And then that pretty much leads like straight into the next sphere of intimacy. Like it's pretty much inevitable once you get to personal intimacy. It just leads straight into the third, which is emotional intimacy. And I remember when I reread this today, but when I wrote in my notebook, like these 5 stages, I tried to put a bullet point underneath each one and be like, okay, what is this? Hello, Welder Bear. Welcome. And what I wrote under emotional intimacy was like, I don't think I understand this too well. Like I don't think I fully grasped what emotional intimacy is. And it's true, I don't. I really don't. But I think emotional intimacy is I don't know, sharing your feelings and like just explaining how your personal history has made you feel in the past and how it makes you feel now. Like no, there's definitely something more to emotional intimacy. I'll admit that, but I really I really don't fully grasp it in its entirety or even in partially. So like I don't know if you've got any thoughts on what emotional intimacy is, I'd love to hear them. So after emotional intimacy, you go into physical intimacy, which is anything from holding hands all the way up to fornication. Just pure sex for pleasure. That's physical intimacy. I don't consider that love or the next form of intimacy that I'll get into. You know, physical intimacy is pretty self explanatory. And if you've gotten your intellectual, personal, and emotional intimacy down and like you feel comfortable with that, then great. Introduce some physical intimacy, you know, hugs, holding hands, maybe some kisses, you know, nothing wrong with that. You know, fornication might not be the best idea. I don't think so. I think you're better off waiting until marriage. But nonetheless, it's just part of physical intimacy. And then the last fifth sphere of intimacy that I came up with was spiritual intimacy. And I figured that there's a transition from every sphere of intimacy into the next one. Like there's a transitional idea or yes, absolutely. You know, completely subjective and you know, it's all about the two people that are deciding to be intimate with each other. You know, it moves at different times. And just today, you know, I was thinking about this earlier on. And just today, I had the image in my mind about, you know, it looks like a Venn diagram, essentially, but it's with like 5 of them, possibly 7. But the one on the end and one on the beginning are, yeah, that's a good point. Um, I suppose you definitely could, you know, travel through the different spheres of intimacy for sure. But, so the transitional phase, or I can't think of a good word for it, but how you transition from the first 4 spheres of intimacy up to physical, leading into spiritual intimacy, is love. I don't believe you can enter the realm of spiritual intimacy without love. And I guess I should say what I think spiritual intimacy is. It involves getting and being married, making babies, which is, I'm making that distinction between fornication and pure sex for pleasure and having sex to make babies. Which part do you agree with? How you can move through the different spheres of intimacy through time, and you might not always be in all of them, or you might only be in the 2. It can be what you focus on at the time. If you and your wife, you've covered all the 5 spheres, you've worked through them obviously to get to the point where you're at. So now that you are where you're at, you can choose to focus on a certain sphere, and you can move through them. And in a certain point of time, you can be at intellectual intimacy and just focusing on that. But then you can also freely move into whatever other sphere you want. Once you've conquered intimacy, that's not a good word for it, but once you've, developed legitimate intimacy with a person, going through 5, that love needs a spiritual sphere to be full. Yeah, it's big. When I realized that, when I came up with this 5 spheres and realized that to enter the realm of spiritual intimacy, you need love. That was a big one for me. That seemed like a big realization. Because no, you don't need love to make babies. But it's very important to have love for someone if you want the babies to have any sort of good life. Because ideally, you raise them together, you make a family. The physical goes through phases. Yeah. Married life. That's funny. But of course, hugs, holding hands, just cuddling, being present with each other. That's all physical intimacy. So like I said, spiritual intimacy is being married, making babies. That was another one. But essentially, anything that you can do together as a man and woman in the service of God. That's what I think spiritual intimacy is. And for that to be possible, for a man and woman to come together and do things solely in the service of God, you need love for. Absolutely. You need love. So I think there's a transitional period or main thing that you need to reach or to transition from one sphere to the other. And the other day, I think I came up with another word for what the transition is from intellectual to personal intimacy. It's trust. For most people, you can be fine with sharing your opinions, talking about your ideas, saying your thoughts, all that jazz. It's not that big of a deal. if someone doesn't agree with you, doesn't like your opinions, so what? It's only my intellect. It's not what I really am. It's not my personal, like, it's just what you think. It's not what you necessarily it's not what you necessarily live or embody. You can, but it's very superficial, more or less. It can go deeper, for sure. Intellectual intimacy can go very deep, but when you're starting out to be intimate with someone, it is kind of shallow. But it's the first stage. So you got to start somewhere. But once you get intellectual intimacy down, or just at a good base level to where you feel comfortable with the other person sharing your thoughts, opinions, and ideas, then through that, I believe you develop trust. And that is when you can move to the next sphere of intimacy, which is personal. So I haven't come up with the other three transitions from personal to emotional, emotional to only two. Oh, yeah, I'm retarded. There's only two more. Because if it's trust to go from intellectual to personal, then you need something to go from personal to emotional, and from emotional to physical. And then love is to go from physical to spiritual. So, what could be the transition from personal intimacy to emotional intimacy? Because if you already have trust for the person, you need trust to feel okay with sharing your personal history. Or at least you're better off having trust before you do that. So, what do you need to feel, or what's good to have before you start sharing your emotional intimacy? Maybe something like a personal connection, or feelings, like care. Yeah. Do you care about the person? Do they care about you? I like that. Care. Okay, so you need care, or need to feel like the person cares about you. And then that's when you'd go into emotional intimacy. So, trust, care, what takes you from emotional to physical? What what would make you want to be with another human physically? What makes us want to do that? Because it's not love. Love is rarely present unless it already is, like when you want to be with someone physically. It's not love. So it might be something more like animalistic. And like I know that has bad connotations to it, but I'm not thinking about that here. I'm just thinking of like a base urge that we have as people, like to be physical with someone else. trust, care, like I wouldn't say attraction, because attraction could be present during intellectual intimacy. Desire, maybe, because yes, we as humans do desire, like it's in our nature to desire to be physical with someone else. To hug someone, it's just like people need hugs. People need to feel the touch of other people. It's a base desire that we can't get away from. And if you do, like if you never touch somebody, you're just going to feel like shit. You're going to feel secluded and depressed and just morbid. And, the 6-foot distancing was all about that during COVID schmovid. It was all about just making us feel secluded and that we weren't connected to anybody physically. So I like desire, but I feel like I'm missing something. Like it's got to be desire for something, I think. Like, what do you desire? Sure, you desire for the physical touch and the intimacy of that with another human being, but I feel like desire for something. Like there might be a word that would work better than just desire, because it would be like desire for. But maybe it's just desire, because desire for physical touch, intimacy. So 5 stages of intimacy: intellectual, personal, emotional, physical, and spiritual. The 4 transitions through the 5 spheres of intimacy: trust, care, desire, and love. I like it. Now, there's also, in my mind, a pre-intimacy phase and a post-intimacy phase. Now, I only came up with the idea that there's a post-intimacy phase earlier today. Maybe a couple weeks ago, when I was fleshing out this idea a little bit, I thought about how there's obviously a pre-intimacy phase. Like when you meet someone and start talking to them, you don't directly just go into being intimate. That's not how it works. You get to know them a little bit, like at a very, very shallow base level. You get to, like, you talk about what you do, what what you do for work, what you do for fun, just very base level things, just to find out, like, what is this person up to. You're not developing any type of intimacy at all in the beginning. You're just working through, like, trying to figure out, who is this person? Can I share my thoughts and opinions with them? Do I feel comfortable with that? Or are they weird? Are they a loser? So that's all in the pre-intimacy realm. And I want to figure out what is in the post-intimacy realm. So, part of post-intimacy might be a little bit like what you talked about, Port Bear, about how you can travel through the other spheres of intimacy. It's like once you've reached post-intimacy, you've not conquered, but you've worked through all the spheres of intimacy, which means you can freely move through them as you please. And so what do you do? What else do you do? What can you do after making it through the 5 spheres of intimacy? I mean, it's not just like, all right, have fun with that. I wish you well. Have a good night. I hope they go to sleep easily. Um, peace. If you're leaving. Yeah. Um, so, what can you do after the 5 spheres of intimacy? It's not like you're done being intimate once you get to post intimacy. That's not what I'm saying. It's about, like, intimacy never ends. There's not a start and an end point necessarily. It's an ongoing thing. But I don't know. Once you reach a point where you've become spiritually intimate, you're doing things as a man and woman together in the service of God. Making babies is a part of that. But you're doing things for the service of God. That is spiritual intimacy. And, that doesn't end. You don't get past that. Like, that's what you do in your life as you're married. So, what is post intimacy? What is it? Is there such a thing as post intimacy? I just had the image in my mind of the 5 spheres of intimacy, which is like a giant, overlapping Venn diagram of like one sphere here, and then another sphere here, and then another sphere here, and another sphere here. The 5 spheres. I just had the image in my mind of once you get to the 5th sphere, the outer edge of it, it expands as a giant circle that encompasses the rest of the spheres from the very end, the edge of spiritual intimacy, into the beginning of intellectual intimacy. And quite possibly, pre-intimacy could be its own circle, or it could be connected to intellectual intimacy. Either way, actually, yeah. Pre-intimacy would be its own sphere on the outside, and then you've got your 5 spheres, and the post-intimacy is the giant sphere that encompasses all those 5 spheres from end to beginning. But then there's the pre-intimacy sphere on the outside. So it's like pre-intimacy is here, and then post-intimacy goes all the way around. And then there's the 5 spheres of intimacy in the middle of that. That's the image I have in my mind. So, that being said, post intimacy is not really what the words describe it as, because you're never done with intimacy. It's not post. You're still in the midst of it, and I think that image that I described kind of encompasses that idea, where it's not its own circle at all. It's not its own sphere that is part of spiritual intimacy. It's like all the spheres together. That's what post intimacy is. It's like the culmination of all your intimate time together and everything you've done and everything you will do. The big circle, big sphere. I like it. I like it a lot. I'm gonna probably draw that out when I get my notebook. I don't have it with me. This lighting makes it look like I have a really bad eye bag. It's weird. So yeah, I think I've I could keep working through what the 5 spheres of intimacy entail. That would definitely take some work on my part. I feel like I need to do some reading, or like just some research into what the typical ideas are about intimacy and what we consider emotional intimacy, what we consider all these different kinds of intimacy. And but I think I've gained some good ground here. I'm happy with it. See if Saul Flatbear has anything to say. What's up, Saul Flatbear? I just covered the 5 spheres of intimacy that I've coined as intellectual, personal, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And then there's a post-intimacy sphere that encompasses all 5 of those spheres. And then there's a sphere of pre-intimacy that is on the outside of that big circle. That's the conclusion that I just came to in the past, like, 30 minutes, however long I've been talking. But yeah, what's going on with you? Flat Earth? Yeah, I mean, we can talk about that. I'm down. I was just telling my family about how, hey, NASA was founded by Nazis, you know? And my mom was like, oh, I don't know about that. I'm like, hey, it's mainstream. You know, Operation Paperclip, look it up. After World War II, thousands of Nazi scientists came over to America and they created NASA. She's like, okay, I'll look it up. And before that, we were talking about Antarctica a little bit. And, what is Antarctica? We don't know what's there. We don't know. I was telling them that there's this thing called the Antarctic Treaty that was created after World War II, and it's an agreement between all the countries that we don't get to go to Antarctica as common people, and we don't get to explore and discover it for ourselves. It's not ours. They get to be there. They get to have their bases and do whatever they want in Antarctica, but not us. No. 36 minutes. Interesting. Okay. So, yeah. I mean, flat Earth is just the logical conclusion to, all those talking points. It just makes sense once you go through all that. Once you see that the moon landing, utter bullshit. Once you see that we don't get to go to Antarctica, and that NASA was created by Nazis. Oh yeah, I told them that I think NASA is about mind control. That's what started and I told them about how everything that NASA releases is an image. And just look up what the definition of image is. It's not a photograph, it's not anything real, it's a creation. Something they made. It's an image. So I gave that point to them. It was fun. It was. So yeah. Intimacy and flat Earth. I think telling someone that you believe the Earth might be flat and that you don't see any curve, I think that's a part of intellectual intimacy. And I've done that with the people that I've talked to recently, like the girls that I've hung out with and whatnot. And, it doesn't go over too well usually. So I guess I just got to keep trying and, maybe someday there'll be a girl that hears me say that, hey, I don't see a curve out there. Yeah. I just don't see one. And I don't think, like, you can't see one. Go up in a hot air balloon. You don't see a curve. Like, maybe a girl will hear that one day and be like, this guy gets it. That's what I hope for. But yeah, I'm a peace out. All right. Don't be a bitch. All right. Peace.